Life Audio.
Because he loves us so much. He wants to do anything that is for our good and his glory combined, not separate from each other, but combined.
So many of us believe in something far beyond ourselves, and now there's a special place for us. Fox Faith on Fox Nation, with exclusive original premium content that lifts us up, sustains our spirit, and fills us up with hope. Now you can stream hours and hours of commercial-free, faith-based content anytime, anywhere. With exciting series like God Family Football, about a coach, a team, and their faith. And streaming November 17th, Martin Scorsese presents The Saints, one of America's greatest storytellers, recreates the lives of Joan of Arc, Maximilian Kolbe, Sebastian, and John the Baptist. Before they were saints, they were people. Then, streaming December 8th, Jesus Crown of Thorns, a new epic original docudrama series. They fought for his power, he conquered with love. You know his story, but not like this. Fox Faith is only available by subscribing to Fox Nation. So go to foxnation.com and sign up today.
Check out some of the recent and upcoming episodes from the Salvation Army's Words of Life podcast. Throughout November, we're focused on missions with a panel of missionaries who share their testimonies and what they've learned about mission work over the years.
People that were Hindu, people that were Muslim. You can't form any kind of church. You can't do anything without building a relationship with those people.
And throughout December, we are so excited to be joined by worship leader and pastor April Christina Farmer as we focus on gratitude this Christmas season.
People feel that all the time, like, how in the world? Why would you let this person go? Why would you let me walk through that? Why would you allow this sickness to overtake my body? And Jesus is like, I know it's tough, but you don't know what's coming. I do. Will you trust me?
Listen to the Salvation Army's Words of Life wherever you get your podcasts, or visit wordsoflifepodcast.org.
Hello and welcome to the Encourager Podcast, where we have encouraging conversations to help you joyfully harmonize your home and work life. I'm your host, Rebecca Scott. I'm a wife, mother, designer, coach, and author. I'm here to help encourage and empower you to confidently make decisions that work for you and your stage of life, whatever that might be. Hello, Encouragers. Today's podcast is brought to you by Just Thrive Probiotics, my go-to supplement to feel more energized and lighter. I also love the Just Thrive Calm supplement to keep my thoughts from spinning and keep me more focused and in the moment. Use code ENCOURAGER to get 15% off by going to justthrive.com. Today we are speaking with Rachel Wojo, our guest on the podcast today, who is a wife, a mother, an author, a podcaster, and what I have titled her a grief warrior, because you have been through some deep-seated grief, which probably sounds a little bit like all grief is deep, but tell us a little bit about your grieving journey, because it's intense.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. I'm really honored to be a part, and thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of my story with you. I have been through a lot in my lifetime. I hope that when people read it, they don't think it was all at once, because praise the Lord, that wasn't the case. Some people hear the story of long-term suffering, though, and feel like that makes it harder in some ways. I think all of us have different slants on grief and loss. We've all experienced some kind of loss, and it's challenging in today's world to even compare. So I just want to share the story with you, and maybe that you'll get your head wrapped around a little bit and hope to understand that I can hear your heartbeat when you're talking about difficult things. So when I was young, in my 20s, before I even went to college, I graduated from a Christian school. My parents were Christians, and we attended church my whole life. When I was born, my mom took me to church, and then I got to Christian college, graduated from there, went on to marry a pastor, and he was candidating at the time, a young preacher. He was candidating and attempting to get a place of his own where he would be able to serve in ministry. We had a beautiful little girl together. Her name is Taylor. And then life kind of went in a different direction than what I ever imagined. We did not get the white picket fence. And instead, we found ourselves dealing with a man who had had an affair for 4 of the 5 years that we were married. And so then I received shortly after that a diagnosis. After the divorce, I received a diagnosis for my special needs daughter. And it was a rare metabolic disorder, mucopolysaccharidosis. The average lifespan expectancy is 10 to 15 years. And so life took a different turn than I ever thought it would. Shortly before we received that diagnosis, I lost my mom to leukemia. So in a very short time, my world really turned upside down, and I had to choose how I wanted to handle all of that. Now, most of us in the Christian world would try to figure that out and lean on God. So maybe the person listening today is like, yeah, this cliche, yada, yada. I've heard this before. But I guess I would say that in that place, I figured out as a 27-year-old that I could choose to either run to God or run away from God. And I chose kind of a middle ground. I chose what I would call stiff arm God, and where I wanted him close enough to where I could get him if I needed him. But I was angry. I was upset. And so I kind of just held him at arm's length and tried to figure things out for a while. So for someone who had grown up praying and reading the Bible and checking off the to-do list of all those Christian things, suddenly it got real. Did I really believe that God was who he said he was? And could I trust him with my life? So that's where I found myself. And I hope that gives just a little bit of a background and answers your question.
Yes, and I know because from your book and previewing that too, you've lost both your parents since.
Yes. So while I was writing the book Desperate Prayers, my dad became much more ill with the cancer he had suffered from for many years, and I lost him in the middle of writing that book. Yeah.
Wow. And I don't know from experience, but we all have friends and family that have gone through divorces, and yours with all of the betrayal too is its own space for grief as well.
Right.
As you grieved, like you said, the white picket fence wasn't going to happen, then a diagnosis from your daughter. I super like your analogy of stiff arming, because it is sometimes in our desperateness, like we don't know if we can truly be as angry as we really are, and if God can handle that emotion, or if we can truly be as desperately sad, if we're supposed to have that, because we do have this hope in him. My listeners are aware my oldest brother died by suicide in 2014, and grieving that wrecked a ton of like physical things for me, but also mental and spiritual things as well. And I just remember thinking the same thing. It's like, gosh, can you truly handle all these emotions? Because they are coming in no order and in all different kinds of ways. And so it is a wrestling, if you will, with your faith, because the things that you thought were so foundational and so, like you said, but we're not willing to admit, like, check Marty, like, I attend church and I even volunteer at the church and I help with youth group and my kids can memorize Bible verses, like that. And then you're like, wait, what is going on in my life? And how fair is this? So I like that you're talking. Tell us a little bit about when you chose that middle ground, how that worked out, because I know the truth is then he became closer. So how did you do that transition where you're like, fine, I can no longer hold the stiff arm?
So you use that word wrestling. And I would like to say that I just had this sudden realization and everything was great. But this was years of trying to figure out, did I or did I not believe in what the Lord was doing in my life? And God brought an amazing man into my life shortly after I had divorced. And so before, when I said we received a diagnosis, then my husband and I have been married now for almost 25 years. But at the time, he came into my Taylor's life as her stepfather. So the Lord grounded me. I think a lot of my grounding came from that relationship. I sat in church and I thought, what is the purpose of all of this? I sort of got over the anger because I knew that the anger and the bitterness wasn't what I wanted. anymore. It felt like such a shackle, and it felt so heavy and a burden, and I knew I didn't want that. But I wanted to know how God was working and what he was doing. And so one week, the pastor, worship pastor, got up in front of the church and he said, we're looking for testimonies for our Christmas program. And he explained, we really want to minister to people during this time. And if you feel like this description fits you, then would you please send an email to me or let me know? And so I thought about it for about 2 seconds. And I thought, okay, God, I think this might be something that you want me to do. And so I sent him an email. And that Christmas, the church put a little video together of our family's story and Taylor's story and what we were going through, and shared how we were trying to learn how to trust God and lean on God through it. And in those days, the Christmas program was aired. 40 people came to know Jesus. And at that point was when I realized, okay, I get this. This is supposed to be a story to point other people to you. It's for my good, yes, but it's for your glory. And I think pairing those two things together helped me so much to be able to stop some of the wrestling and stop the roller coaster of emotion and really just choose to trust God and believe that he is who he says he is and that he will do what he says he will do.
Yes, like the phrase, he never wastes any pain, which is, it becomes, I think the word is pithy, it's like, yeah, but I'm still having to go through it. And I like that you said you saw the fruit later, because as you're wrestling, you're like, what is the point here? Like, is there going to be any fruit? And even if you're begrudgingly going forward, he will show, if we're open and we keep coming, even if we're stiffing on him, he will show you the fruit of what is going on if we can just hang on.
Yeah. And sometimes, Rebecca, we have to come to grips with the fact that there are times where we will not know this side of heaven. We will never be able to wrap our brain around it, our mind around it, and that we have to trust that it's not until we get to heaven that we will understand those things. I've heard people say, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God, and then they have their list of questions. And I just think that when we get to heaven, our bodies will be whole, our minds will be whole, and we will understand without asking the questions. For the first time ever, all of the connections will be line to line, dot to dot, the picture complete, and we'll understand it. So I just bank on God's word being true, and that, as Billy Graham said, I've read the last chapter, and it's all going to be okay.
Yeah. I think that is kind of comforting as well, because I'm such a curious person anyways. I'm like, I'm going to have 20 billion questions anyways. But to think about the questions that are sometimes the most painful to ask, the way that you painted it helped me to relax, to just visualize like it will make sense. And the key piece there is the trusting, which is what he's asked us to do every single day, in grieving or not, in just regular life, in victories and in broken dreams. Trust and trust and trust. So I must ask too, Rachel, how old was your daughter when she passed?
She was 22 years old. So God gave
she made it further than what they had said.
Yes, God gave us 7 more years. I believe there's so many reasons for that too. I think that he was using her story in so many ways, that he preserved her. I think he gave us wisdom and understanding to know how to take care of her, even when medical professionals didn't. And that helped us enable her to have a longer, healthier lifespan than the average child. So yeah, that is a special blessing. Thanks for asking that.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
Streaming now on Fox Nation, God, Family, Football.
As a head football coach, my job is to teach these boys to worship is what it means to win.
A new series that follows a small-town football team.
My little brother was diagnosed with leukemia. It just pushes me to be stronger.
With a big-time heart.
I always do trust in God.
Go inside their lives and follow their faith.
Everybody needs help tackling life.
God, Family, Football. A new series streaming now. Part of Fox Faith on Fox Nation. Sign up at foxnation.com.
Over 20 million fans have made Trans-Siberian Orchestra their holiday tradition. Bring the whole family and make it part of yours. The Lost Christmas Eve live in concert. Don't miss the all-new show. Coming to a city near you. Go to tsotickets.com for info. The return of Trans-Siberian Orchestras. The Lost Christmas Eve.
So as we talk about grieving, what are the hardest words you've had to whisper to your own heart? Because a whisper is so much gentler. Since Taylor's death, like what are the things you had to whisper to yourself?
I'm guessing, based on what you've shared with me, Rebecca, that is probably something you've had to tell yourself too. And that is, I did not die when my daughter died. God has a plan for me. And so for us, for you, as a survivor of what you've walked through in your family, that's the label, survivor. And it sounds like a really, when you look at it in obituary, it doesn't sound like a very, very pleasant word. But the truth is that is what we are. We have lived beyond what our loved one has. And so coping with that, trying to figure that out is really difficult. And I think for me, I just had to cling to what Paul says in Acts about in him, we live and move and have our being. God is breathing. He's given us breath in the morning. Our heart is beating inside of our chest. And as long as those things are happening, he has a plan and a purpose for us. So whispering that to myself, I have a purpose. I can get my feet out of this bed. I can put them on the floor. I can swing myself up. I can pray and ask the Lord, help me today. Help me do the next right thing for my family, for myself. Just help me put one foot in front of the other. You know this, when you're in deep grief and loss, that's about the extent of what you can do.
Yeah. And it does go down to just that basic, like if there is breath in my lungs, then there's purpose. So I will schleck it into my slippers and make it to the next thing. But yeah, I love that if there's breath, there's purpose, and he will use it. Okay. So many people struggle with going through grief, as we talked about, getting into the trust factor of God and knowing it's okay to say our emotions, no matter how rage-like they are or no matter how desperate and sad they are. Can you help us touch, in those moments, I'd rather just audibly hear him, which, by the way, I pray about all the time. God, can you just give me the audible message? And I think he is like, Becca, no, because then I would treat it like a to-do list. I know that's what he's saying, and he wants more communion with me than just that. But how do we lean on hearing God's voice, whatever that might be, audible, spiritually? How do we lean on that? Because clearly, throughout these grieving process that you did several times with several different people in your life, how did you hear it?
I remember one specific story that I can share that maybe will paint the picture for someone. I was sitting in Taylor's room, and this particular day, I was pretty grumpy, pretty aggravated and anxious and irritated because she had just finished having a seizure. And those were a regular part of our life in spite of medication. And so watching her body just be uncontrolled through that seizure and watching her convulse and her, uncontrollable eyes and her voice and all of those things put together when someone has a seizure, it feels like, though it's under a minute, it's usually 30 seconds that someone has a seizure. Although it's such a short time, it feels so long. And I remember she was recovering from a seizure and it was gorgeous outside. I wanted so much to be outside with her, and I knew that she would have loved the beautiful day too. And I remember looking outside the window and saying, Lord, I wish that we could be outside in the sunshine. And I felt his Holy Spirit say to me, you can choose to wish you were outside in the sunshine or be thankful for the sunshine that's coming through the window. It's your choice. And I think that measure of gratitude started to help me understand that the Spirit was prompting me along the way to change my perspective, not necessarily be happy about the circumstance, but to change my perspective, to have my eyes wide open, to see what God was doing so that I was aware. And in that state of awareness, he would reveal to me more and reveal to me more. So I hope that's helpful to someone. That nudge of listening to the Holy Spirit can feel such a difficult concept, a hard concept to grasp. And for me, it started with the Holy Spirit speaking to my heart. Spending time in his word. I always tell people, like, God speaks through his word, he speaks through his spirit, he speaks through his people. And some of us need all three because we're hard-headed.
Super highways. Yep. I also I've read a book lately by Mark Batterson that's really good about the Whisper. I think it's called Whisper, and it's seven different prayer languages, and they were and you talked about promptings, and I can remember grieving Philip. This was like maybe 7 days after his tragic death, and I was working. I was at my cutting table at the studio cutting out purses, and I was mad. I was so mad. I was so mad that I had to work that day. I had to push the purse process along, but yet joyful I had something to do. You know what I mean? Like, I love this work. But then I was like, wah, wah, wah. Anyways, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I'm not answering that phone today. And then I just felt like, you need to. And again, it wasn't audible or anything like that. Just a feeling. I answered the phone. It was my church camp counselor, Nicole. Nicole, I love you. And she was calling to check in on me. And it's those kind of things that I was like, that was totally a God thing as well, that she just knew today in this moment, I'm going to reach out. And I was just brutally honest with her. And she's like, yeah, just tell me what's going on. And so that's like a prompting. That can be a voice from God used from loved ones in your life. And so for us also, as we listen to this, don't not say something, even especially in the grieving process with Rachel, I'm sure you're very familiar with. You're going to say the wrong thing. So just ask for grace before it. Say, like, what you're going through is really intense. So I don't know the right words to say, but I'm here. And I will just listen or not, or just stand next to you. Like, ask for permission for all those things to just like be with them. But if you get prompted to reach out to somebody randomly when you're driving on the road, maybe wait, or send them a voicemail or whatever. But do it. Do it. How do you not know that that is not the Spirit saying, will you reach out?
Right.
Will you reach out? Because you got to listen carefully.
Yeah, so good. And so many people say to me, well, how do you know that it's the Holy Spirit? I think the most of the time, the reason I know is because it's not something I would think of myself on my own in my own flesh, if that makes sense. Like, I wouldn't just conjure up that thought because I know me. And I can be pretty selfish,
Yes. Yeah. Or for me too, I'm like, that person? Like, I haven't talked to them in forever. They probably don't even remember who I am, or whatever it is. And I'm like, I could not have come up with that on my own.
Right.
But someone outside of me could have.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you've written a book called Desperate Prayers. Sometimes God's protection looks like a limp. Tell me about that in the book.
Are you familiar with the story of Jacob? I'm sure many of your listeners are. I know you have a lot of great people who are really wanting to learn more about the Lord, and they're diving into the Word. And so when you look at that Old Testament story of Jacob and that wrestling, which we've already talked about, he was wrestling God. He knew that this was an unusual circumstance. And then what happened at the end, so they wrestled all night by themselves. At the end, his hip is winched out of socket. And he says, I'm not letting go until you bless me, because he knew it was the Lord. And so what happened then was, a lot of people don't quite put all of this together, but after that, Jacob always walked with a limp. And the verses after that explanation tell us that the Israelites refused to eat the hip part, the part of the meat of a lamb that is right beside the joint of that socket, because it feels like a desecration to their honoring Jacob by not eating that meat. Okay, so you fast forward to the New Testament. And in Hebrews chapter 11, the great hall of faith, when it talks about Jacob, and there's a lot of territory there, a lot of property for the number of verses given to Jacob. And it says he worshiped God leaning on his staff. There's that little hint that explains to us that he still had that limp. He was still leaning on the staff. He still had a hip joint that did not work all of those years later. So he lived the rest of his life from his wrestling to the end of his life with that limp. And I sort of compare that in the book to my own story, in that I had a daughter, special needs daughter, Taylor, who I birthed via emergency C-section. So I have a scar. And I always thought of that scar, the surgeon, when she delivered Taylor, was like, your scar is very small. It's very minimal. You're going to be so happy because no one is ever going to know that it's there except for you. And so when Taylor passed away, one day I was looking down and I thought, oh my gosh, there's the scar. That's my reminder. That's my protection. Because, Rebecca, I was afraid that after Taylor passed away, she kept me tethered to Jesus so much that I was afraid that I would forget what it was like to rely on God and be dependent on him. And I always wanted to keep that desperation fueled to the point to where I was depending on the Lord all the time. I don't ever want to lose that. And so when we look at Jacob's picture and we look at what the limp looks like, I'm sure everyone listening has a piece of your story that maybe you wish hadn't happened. Mm-hmm. Maybe you wish looked different. Maybe you wish you weren't leaning on a staff because of all that happened in that era. But I think the protection element is this. Jacob, before the wrestling, was known as a runner. Every time something happened, he ran away from God. He ran away from his brother. He ran away from his family. So God's protection was, dude, you're not going to be running anymore. Not only will you rely on a staff, that staff is going to keep you relying on me. And I think that's the way the Lord has worked in my life. He has allowed me to have this limp that protected me and kept me close to him. And it just was fuel for the fire of being totally reliant on him. I think so much, hopefully, that shares that perspective of a limp, and maybe someone listening can get a new grasp on how that's God's protection, because he loves us so much. He wants to do anything that is for our good and his glory combined, not separate from each other, but combined.
I mean, I know the story, but I didn't relate the two stories together. Gosh, he's a good author. Like, think about his, now I'm going to put this line in there to still note that, this guy is still leaning. Mm-hmm. Wow, that is profound.
It's really easy for us to forget that he was a runner before that, and so many of us are. So many of us are like that. Mm-hmm. Like my oldest daughter used to say, I'm going to do it by ourselves, Daddy. And you know what would happen then? Like the milk would get spilled or the cereal would go on the floor or, whatever. And isn't that how we are with God?
Mm-hmm. And God forbid, do not slow me down. Do not slow me down, right? Because we want to keep running. Even if we think we're running in the direction of God and we're running in the direction of serving him and glorifying him, let's be more observant of the running.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, Rachel, you are also an author of many books. How many books have you authored?
So I have about 14 self-published books and then a traditionally published book and a couple of collaboratives. It's been over the course of 15 years that I have written those books. And so I feel really blessed that I just wouldn't give up on what God had for me and just tried to do the best that I could with the skill set that I had in order to honor the messages that he gave me and get them into the hands of people. So,
Yes. Oh, well, thank you. And I think that obviously after this much practice, it is truly a gift and something that he has laid on your heart to keep authoring. This book that we want to talk about today is called Desperate Prayers, Embracing the Power of Prayer in Life's Darkest Moments. You got the smallest little smidgen today from Rachel about what it's about. But out there, you guys listeners, if you are grieving, and this may be grieving from 10 years ago, because we all know the grieving process does not have its nice, neat little timeline. It does not. But if this will speak to you or to a friend or a family member, please do share this podcast with them to tell about Rachel's work, because as soon as you dive into one, you're going to want to dive into the other books to talk about all the other prayer requests that she has clearly written out to help those of us who are still trying to hear the voice of God in our prayers in many multiple ways. Rachel, how do our listeners reach out to you?
Oh, so awesome. Thank you for asking. I can always be reached at rachelwojo.com. For this particular book, we do have a very simple way. It's just desperateprayers.com. And all of the content is right there if you want to order the book, or if you say, I just need a little bit of help understanding more. We have a beautiful When You Can't Pray prayer guide that allows you, it's basically like Mad Lib prayers. You plop your issue or problem into the blank and the rest of the prayers written out. And I found that borrowing the prayers of other people is often helpful when I just can't find the words on my own. So I hope that's helpful to someone.
That's amazing. I love that. We're all very practical. My listeners are a lot like myself. We're very practical, actionable people. So did you guys hear that? It's a Mad Lib for prayers. Sign me up. Sign me up. Because sometimes at the end of the day, words are difficult. And I ask for the Holy Spirit to intercede, because I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm out of words again. And while that's not fair, at least I'm still in prayer, but this would be a wonderful exercise to walk through. Rachel, I always end the podcast with saying, how can you encourage our encouragers?
Oh, wow. It's a deep question, because I think that when you have so many people like you do, where people just have a positive outlook, they want to encourage others, they have a desire to look up and look out, it can be really difficult to encourage the encouragers. But I was thinking about this, and maybe this is just a little bit of a challenge to act, like you said, on what God puts on your heart, even when you don't feel confident or sure. If that person comes to mind that you need to text or send that note, or drop by and pick up a gift card, whatever it is, whatever thought that it is, just go ahead and act on it, because whether it's you in the flesh or the Spirit speaking, God will do something good with it.
Yes. Oh, thank you. That is a great way to end the podcast. Until next time, encouragers, we got this because He's got us. Thanks so much for tuning in. If the Encourager podcast has helped or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review. And then help us spread the message of encouragement and hope by sharing the podcast with others. Ready to bring more organization and joy into your life? The Encourager Academy helps you harmonize your home and work life through our online course and coaching programs. Our 5-system approach, me, food, family, work, and home, tackles your biggest obstacles, offering lifetime access to video lessons and guided worksheets. Learn at your own pace with practical tools and strategies. Enroll now at encourageracademy.com and use code WeGotThis for $50 off. Are you ready to finally create systems that help you thrive in both home and work life? Join my 10-week coaching cohort designed for busy women like you. Together, we'll create customized, foolproof systems for managing your home, business, and personal life with joy and purpose. With live coaching, practical tools, and a supportive community, you'll leave feeling organized, confident, and in control. Don't wait. Spots are limited to 10 women. Visit encouragerpodcast.com to apply.
Hey, I'm Jeff King, the president of Persecution.org and the host of Faith Under Fire, where we examine threats to the faith and the transformative spiritual lessons of the persecuted church. If you're a deep Christian looking for life-changing content or just trying to make sense of political attacks on the faith, come listen to Faith Under Fire.